All right, guys, what's up? Friday the
Good morning.
13th. Good morning.
Afternoon on the East Coast here in Atlanta.
It's getting scary up in here. Yeah. So if you are on the New York City subway, you will see signs everywhere that say, "If you see something, say something." Right? A lot of citizens, poll workers, have done just this. They have sworn affidavits in which they have said something about what they saw in terms of ballots that were run through the machine multiple times, cars they saw showing up in the middle of the night, people going out of exits that were supposed to be secured, and ballots being brought in. And these people are being shamed. They're being doxxed. They're being threatened. And it's a travesty. I mean, that's not how our democracy is supposed to work.
Right.
And I think people, even on the left side of the aisle, need to realize, like, that's not America. So we support those people, and we're going to talk about the state of the race in general, for what our standing is at this point. But hopefully, by the end of this thing, we're going to be able to give you a little bit of hope, and show you some interesting ways in which democracy is working right now.
Yeah.
And now let's get to it. Derek.
Yeah.
Derek has been, Derek's been living in data. He's been living in Excel. I too have been bouncing around all these Secretary of State websites. Unfortunately, a lot of these people who are coming out are getting threatened. We put some key people you should be looking at in Twitter. People's Pundit was, of course, on Tucker last night. Chanel Ryan of One America News did an interview with Code Monkey Z. You should definitely be following him. Also, Cultural Husbandry has some nice data dumps with some programs that they have written for analyzing some of these results. So today, I think we want to look a little bit at, we want to echo some of the concerns that you've seen with Dr. Shiva, with People's Pundit. Derek's done some really good research on the exit polls as well. Of course, we think those are flawed, but one way of showing they're flawed is that they don't hold water amongst themselves.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So what do you think, Derek? I mean, like, first, let's do state of the race, right? Okay. So you're in Georgia,
yep,
where tons of people are moving because Bloomberg's going to pay them for 6 weeks,
and Zuckerberg
to come be quasi citizens for the special election with Loeffler and Purdue. That's crazy. I think that we have something feckless happening here in Arizona, where there's a what's our spread in Arizona? 10,000 votes.
Just under 11,000. Yeah.
And what is it, in order to automatically trigger a recount? We need what point?
I think it's 0.1. It's got to be within 0.1, and we're at 0.3 right now.
Okay.
Trump's at 0.3 right now. So the campaign dropped their lawsuit this morning, or just 40 minutes ago, in court to not challenge, I guess, what they were claiming were overvotes that went to Biden, and that those overvotes should have been tabulated to go to Trump for whatever their. I didn't read the lawsuit, the filing.
Okay.
But that was their thing. They were saying that the amount of overvotes aren't going to be enough to then bring it to that 0.1% or whatever. So they dropped that lawsuit, and I don't know if they've got another lawsuit they're looking to file, if the lawsuits are similar to the ones in Nevada and Michigan, or if they're just going to go with the Dominion software thing.
Right. Well, that's another way of looking at this thing. And also interesting development is that the head of the Republican Party in Arizona, you said.
Yeah, I heard this morning. I didn't validate it or not, but I heard this morning, probably a couple hours ago, maybe back around 10 o'clock Eastern time, that supposedly she resigned this morning. And so I guess you could take it as saying, all right, were you being pressured to do stuff that you weren't comfortable doing in benefit of Trump, or were you being pressured to do stuff, be adverse to Trump? I don't know. I just heard that. If anybody can verify it online, I guess, let us know. But that's what I'd heard this morning on, I think it was either Bannon's show or the Glenn Beck program.
And what do you make of this DHS announcement that this is the most secure election ever?
Yeah, I think they're covering their tracks as much as they possibly can. I mean, if you're
double speak I've never heard somebody say that.
Yeah.
Clearly a lot of eyeballs on the fact that there's something weird here.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, when you've got 200 and something, 230 people coming forward in just one county to claim that they saw all kinds of shenanigans going on. I don't see how you can come out and make a statement. The only reason why they're making that statement, in my opinion, is that they're in on it, right? They use the system, they push the system, and the same system, the Dominion software was used in Venezuela and Cuba for the Maduro election and the last election in Cuba. And so, you're hearing, and that's why the Venezuelan people down in Miami are so upset. They're like, dude, we've seen, this is exactly what happened. Right. So, but so to have the DHS come out, what's also interesting is that, Trump fired one of the heads of the DHS yesterday. Now, my question on that with firing Esper, right, with the head of the election fraud system or whatever at the DOJ.
Right.
He
Pilger.
Pilger, he resigned. And then you're firing the head of the cybersecurity person at DOJ. Right. So I can see what's going to be the take on the left. Oh, see, he's getting the people out that he needs to get his loyal people in because he's not leaving the White House. This is indication that he's going to not leave the White House. Then you heard the top commander, who I guess would be taking Esper's place, at a speech yesterday, or was it yesterday or the day before, saying that they pledged oath to the Constitution, not to a president, not to a party, and not to the current occupant of the White House. Some people meant that, took that to say, all right, is he basically saying, Trump, you're not staying in the White House if this comes down and we're coming after you? Or was that to say, we don't believe the results of the election, and so we're going to swear an oath to the Constitution. If the Constitution says this is this and that plays out, we're going to honor that. So a lot of stuff going on. There's rumors that Esper was lured away from the Pentagon to McConnell's office to where AG Barr fired him, and people say, well, Trump can't fire. Trump can be the only one that can fire him. Well, I guess Trump can give authority to someone to fire him or whatever. So I don't know. A lot of questionable stuff going on. Why would Trump be making these key moves when he's got 80 days left in office if he lost? I mean, you would just say, all right, bag it. I'm going out to the golf course. Leave it to Biden to make these moves if he wants to make the moves. So that some of these things don't make sense to me. And you just have to rationalize as best you can with the pieces of the puzzle that you have.
Well, if you're going to be really corrupt in these things, in my opinion, I think the way to look at it is, it's like we've talked before. If you want to run a human trafficking operation, then you start a nonprofit to fight human trafficking, and you do that.
Correct.
If you want to do something nefarious when it comes to election cybersecurity, you set up an agency under the DHS called FISA, whose ostensible purpose is to secure elections, and you make them fail miserably. This is how corruption happens: is you appear to be fighting the thing that is going to be the Achilles heel of the whole system.
Right.
So when I saw the firing of the AI data intelligence guy that ran that agency, I said, okay, well, clearly he wasn't doing his job, or he was purposely doing his job poorly.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's the lens you have to look at these things. And we're not trying to tell people how to think. We want people to go think for themselves, but all too often this is the pattern.
Right. Well, then you look at, again, if the AG asks Pilger or whatever to look into the election fraud and he resigns, then, and that, again, I think that happened in McConnell's office as well. That if that happened, then are you saying, is the person that resigned saying, okay, I know I'm screwed because I'm going to dig up dirt on myself that I was part of this.
Right.
And so the rumor is that, AG Barr basically said, look, for the last 3 elections, we know this has been going on and you've been overseeing this the whole time. So we're letting you go. And then he said, well, I'm going to resign instead. Right. So, but again, you just don't, if you're going into what looks like massive election fraud in several states, why would you, if it's your job to find it, and this is to make your career. You could go in and say, I've got the golden goose, right? I found it. Yes, there was all kinds of massive fraud going on. So why do you resign? It just,
why do you resign when you're there to do your job? And what about Georgia, right? We're concerned that
Georgia's
the notion of a recount in Georgia is not actually a recount. It looks like it's a spot check on audits.
Right.
Pull a ballot here, ballot there, see if it's legit. I mean, that is in no way digging to the bottom, because it's not looking at the software and it's not looking at
right. Yeah, what they're doing is Kemp disappeared for a few days anyway. And then you had, what's his name, the Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, saying on Monday or Tuesday of this week, saying, we found no irregularities, let's move on. Collins and Loeffler, and I think the head of the GOP in Georgia really put pressure on him to be like, dude, what are you doing? We have clear indications of it. We're hearing it. All these people are coming forward and signing these affidavits. So now they said, okay, fine, we'll do a hand recount. And everybody yesterday thought, okay, perfect. This is great. Right? We got the hand recount that we wanted.
Right.
Well, coming into today, they're only allowing one poll watcher per 10 tables. They're not making you verify that the envelope that the ballot came in, that they're not making you have it. If you do have it, they're saying that the signatures don't have to match. Like there's stuff that just doesn't make any sense. So you're essentially going to come up with the same vote that you got before. And again, my read of that is that they know that it's going to implicate massive fraud, and that they're trying to cover their tracks. Because again, if you got a Republican governor, you would think he would be actually fighting for Trump, right, or for whoever the head of his party is, and
sure,
that doesn't seem to be happening. What I'm seeing is that a lot of Georgia Republicans, myself included, are saying, look, if you're not going to fight, right, if you're going to take this if you're going to let these shenanigans happen, then we're not going to vote in the special election. So we'll just, we'll bail on the ballot and let the Republicans fall, right? I mean, they're going to retain at least 50 seats, right? And if James' seat doesn't get overturned or doesn't get challenged in Michigan, Republicans could pick his seat up if the challenge and the recount goes through in Michigan and shows Trump to win and him to win. So it'd be 51. But I think people will just bail on Georgia. They're like, I mean, why am I going to fight for a party that isn't going to fight for the guy I voted for? So
right. Well, I mean, I think it's really telling that, I think what, some 3% of ballots are typically rejected through any election. And here they had, tiny fractions of a percent rejected in a process that was obviously flawed.
Right.
And whether that's from relaxing the identification requirements of these ballots in terms of signature matching,
right,
or any number of things. I mean, I just feel that there is not a mandate here, and if in the best case scenario, we should completely redo this election.
Yeah, I mean, at least redo it in the states where we know there were irregularities, right? And,
right.
And again, it's like you and I were talking yesterday. What's interesting is Democrats are saying, first it was there's no fraud, right? Then it was, well, there's no massive fraud, and now it's widespread. Now it's, well, there's no systemic fraud. It's like, okay, wait. So if there's first you started at no fraud, so you keep moving the goalpost, right? And then there's no fraud. Then there was no widespread fraud. Now there's no systemic fraud. Well, what's interesting is that all the fraud that's coming up isn't going towards Trump. So, hey, I'm a Democrat, and I can go and say, or a Republican, and I can go and say that I saw, Republicans in precincts in Texas, right, with 10,000 ballots.
Right. The argument that fraud goes both ways is not holding.
It's not, right? And if it's true, and look, I think we both agree, fraud happens on both sides, right? I mean, I'm not here to try to deny that there's not some in some of these Republican precincts, there's not some shenanigan going on. But what we're seeing is overwhelmingly, I mean, it's almost like the IRS stuff when they basically were banning the Tea Party from getting super PACs and PACs together back in 2012 or whatever. It's all going one way. So the fraud's all going one way, right? The Dominion software all seem to have. I mean, it went both ways, but the overwhelming side of it went to Biden.
Right.
I mean, everything that could happen, right? All the polls, all the pre-polls, all went to Biden, right? It's impossible for everything to go one way and there not to be some systemic fraud. Now, if you just look at Georgia, in 2018, there were 230 early absentee ballots cast. 3.5% got rejected. So 3.5% of those. In 2020, 1.2 million were cast. Only 0.3 got rejected so far.
Come on.
In Pennsylvania.
Wait, there was a 3x increase. That's in mail-in ballots.
Yeah, 3.5%. Yeah, 230,000 ballots to 1.2 million. So a 4x, right? 4 times.
4x of just mail-in or total ballots cast?
Just absentee ballots. Just absentee. Georgia didn't do mail-in ballots. You had to do an absentee or do a request for mail-in.
COVID request.
They said that 1.2 million so far absentee ballots have been counted this year with a 0.3 rejection. Pennsylvania, rejection rate was 30 times lower than the rate predicted based on historical precedents. Only 0.036 mail-in ballots were rejected compared to 1% in 2016. Now, granted, that's not enough. I mean, even if and I think they said there was going to be 3 million ballots cast this year, mail-in ballots cast. So, I mean, that's 30,000 if you go to 1%. It's not enough to overturn the election, right? But what you're seeing here, but then again, you look at Milwaukee, and Steve Dace covered this really well in his program this past week. He said, these people, if you look at when the dumps came, right, all these late ballot dumps at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, either Milwaukee County is the dumbest of the dumb counties in the entire planet, right, in the entire country, that they don't know how to put a stamp on a mail, right? They don't know where the mailboxes are, when to drop it in the mail, right? It's like they are literally the stupidest people in the world, or there's something else going on, right? Because how does ballot show up at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? It's like, again, these things can't be mutually exclusive of each other, right? So something was going on. In Milwaukee, again, you had a population of 590,000 was the estimated population for this year. 93% registered to vote. That's impossible, right? So that's 550,000. Of that, their participation rate was 83.7%. Yet the population of Milwaukee County has dropped 1% since 2016.
Doesn't make sense.
And then, like we covered in the other one, right, with Dane County, when you're up to an 85%, participation rate, and yet 50,000 less people, or 50,000 people have moved in since 2010. So either something lit a fire under their ass, and they're like, man, I just so hate this guy. I'm getting to the poll, because it doesn't make any sense. The mail-in ballot thing was done to overwhelm the system, clearly, as we know.
Right.
And I mean, you look at so I went and researched about mail-in ballots in other countries. In the OECD, so the Opportunity or Economic Zone in Europe, 78% of the countries, this is a quote from the research that was done, 78% of the countries either do not allow mail-in ballots, quote unquote, for people living in the country, or they require a photo ID to get a mail-in ballot. In the EU, 85% of countries either bar mail-in ballots for people not living abroad or require a photo ID for such a ballot, according to the report that was done. So if you look at all the issues now that we face in our election, right, that's in the balance, right? That's why we're in this where we are, because they overwhelm the system with these mail-in ballots. Nevada sent out to everybody that was on their voter roll as of 2010. And I mean, there's been 3 million people that have come in and out of that state, I think they said, since 2010, either moved in or moved out. And so you could be living in Colorado and have gotten a ballot sent to you or whatever. You're like, I don't even live in the state anymore. So, right. I mean, it was a cloud.
Actually, the last time a Republican was actually tried for election fraud was the guy sent back his ex-wife who Republican's ballot.
Right.
And so that's a count of one, and people point to that as like, oh, Republicans do it too. I'm sorry, it's not the same as finding a trove of 6,000 ballots or 100,000 ballots.
Correct.
We got a lot of pushback from posting Dr. Shiva, who ran for Senate in Massachusetts. We got a lot of pushback from his very thoughtful look at the way in which you notice that the drop off of Republican votes was linear and related to the percentage of Republican registrations in each precinct. And he just analyzed all the precincts in Michigan to do that. And people immediately were like, this has been debunked, and threw a Medium, article on it. But you read the Medium article, like, I didn't make the case.
Right.
It's like people are just looking for a quick hit to say, that's not right. Let's do this. But even if you disagree with his data science, the law is you have to keep these ballot images. So basically, we went through a fraudulent count, and then they destroyed all the ballot images. Like, oh, we won. And it's like, no way, man. I mean, like, you have to have these ballot images have to be saved by law for 22 months. So should that process invalidate the election?
You would think so.
That be something that, like, people are infuriated about.
Yeah, you would think. I mean,
just shoving these results down our throat, and even Democrats who are smart data science people are going, this doesn't look right, guys.
Well, the guy that actually did in the Dr. Shiva thing, right? The guy that actually pulled all the precincts in the four counties surrounding Detroit,
Yeah.
He's a Democrat. And if you look at his Twitter feed or his, it's like, dude, he's pretty far left.
Yeah.
Right. And yet he was sitting there going, this makes no sense. And so when he was asked, what's the likelihood that what you found in Oakland, Macomb, Wayne, and Kent County could happen? He's like, look, I would never say 0% because that's when you get in trouble as a scientist. But then 1%, right? And if you look, I don't know if I can share my screen here. Yeah. I will try to show.
Yeah, I think Shiva's a smart guy, and he lays.
Yeah. So put that up there. So here you have what Dr. Shiva and Benny Johnson, I think was his name, are talking about.
Yep.
So the bottom here is the Republican percentage of each precinct. So the higher percentage precinct that's Republican, what's odd is the lower the vote goes for Trump. And if you see, this is when the precincts came in, right? So the closer you are to the 0 here, the closer to a Democrat precinct you are, or an equal, 50-50 type of precinct. So if you notice, and their numbers were showing that Trump was at about 7% here, and I think is this Wayne, or this is Oakland County? Oakland County. This was the early voting, and then it started to drop. This is when all the new ballots came in. So in early voting, even Democrats were voting for Trump, and then all of a sudden it goes down in this linear fashion. He did this, and for some reason I don't have the data points here, but he did this for Oakland, Macomb, and Kent, and they all show the exact same thing,
right?
Which is impossible. I mean, he was saying this is if it was correct, you would still be hovered around here, because more Republicans. You would think if I'm in a fairly conservative precinct, there's going to be a higher propensity of votes for Donald Trump, not less.
That's right.
So he was saying if these were Democrat precincts, then sure, you could probably see this, right? But not even this. He said this would not exist. It's literally impossible for this type of thing to happen. So, and we can try to link some of these things when we show our thing in the intro or in the post. But this was a 2,000 precinct data point they use here. You can see in a 2,000 person precinct, 20% less Republicans voted for Donald Trump. But if you're looking, there's nothing really occurring above the line. And this was in a straight ticket Republican versus you go in and I just vote for Trump and then I may vote for Democrats here and there, but straight ticket voting versus doing an individual selection. So I mean, if he was no longer popular among Republicans, which Mike, you and I went through on this before, right? That if you believe the exit polls, or if you believe the entry polls, and what media was telling you is that Trump just is unpopular and everybody's going to go vote against him, then you would see it more like this,
right?
You wouldn't see this. And again, like I said, he shows almost this exact same plot graph for 4 counties. What was interesting, it was in Wayne County, all the blue dots, it trended up this way. Right, so he ended up going more in an upward fashion, which Wayne County is a heavily Democrat and heavily minority county. So it's not possible, and so that's what I think is of interest to people. And the red flag, he said, you should never see it like this.
Right.
The heavier precincts, so you're in a 60% Republican precinct, and yet you're getting 25 to +% of the vote less. It's not how it works. So,
and you also, I mean, Cultural Husbandry also did a really good job of their, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but Cultural Husbandry also has another, it's less of a temporal look, and it's more of a look at just kind of like when those early votes came in, you saw the full scatter, and then it basically, he shows the outliers, or she shows the outliers that basically show you that you had a trend within mail-in ballots that favored Biden more so than the regular ratios. And what we still haven't been able to show, because they don't separate mail-in ballots on these sites, what we still haven't been able to show relative to other previous years is what should the differential between in-person bowling and mail-in voting be over the years. You can't just have it, even if it's a three point spread, it's not a 10-point spread.
Right, and here's what he shows when he pulled the Edison stuff, which I've got access to as well, right? So I've gone through and data mined that. But this is showing what a normal ballot entry should look like. What this means here, where all these blue dots are up above here, this is the Democrat to Republican ratio, vote ratio. So what you're seeing is the votes in Pennsylvania, right, are all over the place. But this is a shuffled ballots, the way that normal mail comes in. Normal mail comes in, gets shuffled. You don't know when you open these ballots, is it for Republican, is it for a Democrat? You have no idea. You just open them up, put them in a pile, open them up, put them in a pile, shove them in the system goes and counts them. You get these dots everywhere. So you see up here,
right.
He was getting 100% of the vote, right? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, almost 6 of these or 7. He got 100% of the vote. Trump got 100% of the vote down here, right? But then was getting, these were generally Republican districts. Then all of a sudden you see a smoothing out. And what this is showing is that they're making these data dumps and they're moving it closer to a dim. So they knew basically right here what they needed to make up. They knew they were behind. So then everything started streaming and going D to R. And what husbandry says is that's impossible, right? And so he said again, and I don't know if you can read it over here again, this is evidence of ballot backdating, manufacturing, or software tampering. Because you just don't see it, but you see it. You saw it in here's Georgia, same thing. Look at that straight line, but look at where all they were. Right, this is, and you and I noticed this as we ended the night.
Yeah,
we were noticing, right, that all of a sudden these dumps were coming, and they were 98% for Biden, right, 90%, so forth and so on. But here you definitely have red-leaning rural areas, and so therefore the dots are spread out because again, when the ballots came in and when they're shuffled and counted. Then you go to Michigan, same thing, right? You did see it, them throwing in stuff down here. This is when they knew they got caught. So now they have to go start throwing, well, look, it happened on both sides. But you should never see this smooth of data. It should always be popped around because of when the shuffle comes or when the mail comes, when it gets shuffled. Here's Virginia. Now, he highlights that in Virginia, it's the only state, he says, let me push this over, the only state out of the 50 that has anomalies but has not had accusations of voter fraud. He thinks this is actually the most voter fraud of any of the states, and yet Trump's not going there. Why? Because you had all of these ballots come in at the end that were a 1.25 to 1 in favor of Biden.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's not possible.
Well, that's the other thing is, and we highlighted this before, is one of the things that has always been traditionally something that gave us a degree of confidence about, the latency, the holdover of votes that are going to be coming in via mail. We've always been our concerns have been assuaged by knowing, all right, at least there's X amount of ballots out there.
Correct.
And so initially in Pennsylvania, right, they were saying, oh yeah, we have 250, 450 ballots out there, and then 750,000 ballots come in, and we say, oh yeah, no, there's more ballots coming in. I mean, at what point can we say, look, you can't just sit here and run out the clock with, the Stalin quote of, it's not who votes that counts, but who counts the votes. No, in reality, whoever is the last one to bring in ballots. I mean, what do I need? 100,000 more ballots. Okay, let me go get them.
Right.
Where are those coming from? And then furthermore, destroying the evidence. Let's get the ballots in. Let's put them on the vote machines counting. And then, you actually want to trace this back to who it was? Sorry, we can't give you any of that information because we've
destroyed the ballots.
Tabs. We've destroyed the ballots and we made the count. So what do you want next?
Right.
Are you going to buy this election? It's like, no, dude, we just want it to be fair.
Right.
And that's anybody who had an older brother that was like, hey, your dimes are smaller than my nickels. Let's swap. I'll give you all my nickels for all your dimes.
Right.
Anybody who had an older brother that was like, counting, one for you, two for me, one for you, two for me. I mean, that's literally what it feels like in this election. And we're sitting here going, okay, all right.
Right. Well, again, I mean, it's like we talked about, right? I mean, in America and really anywhere, but really America, we want a fair fight. That's all. I mean, it's all we ask for, right? You get two boxers in a ring, and you get a referee in there. You want the referee to call them for both, right? If you punch them below the waist, we're going to call it. You got to get it up. It's an umpire in baseball, right?
That's right.
You want balls and strikes. You want the same strike zone. And when you start to notice that, okay, my pitcher's getting the corner, or their pitcher's getting the corner, but mine's not, you know what's going on. It's just unfair. So in this election, all Republicans are asking for is, I mean, even in the Pennsylvania last Saturday, let us have our poll workers in. Alito said, let them in. They have a right to be there, right? And have them sitting and then what do the Democrats do? Oh, okay, fine. We're just going to stop counting. Like, dude, the Supreme Court just ruled to allow them in and to count the ballots is fine, but to segregate those ballots that came in after the close of election, after the polls.
Right.
And what did Pennsylvania do? They said, nope, we're going to stop counting. And, we don't care what the Commonwealth said and what the Supreme Court said. We're going to go to the state Supreme Court. And the state Supreme Court said, nope, you can go ahead and keep counting. That's fine. Right. And overruled the Supreme Court. And I mean, that's just, again, if you've got nothing to hide, Democrats always talk about transparency and
right.
If you want to be transparent, then one, let all the recounts happen anyway. If you know your guy won and you've got the votes, then let the recounts happen. But if you're counting the votes and you know your guy won, again, if I cheat on a test, or if I'm accused of cheating on a test and I know I didn't, then teacher, come sit down next to me, give me the same test, I'll take it in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. So you're having to prove, essentially what Democrats are trying to say is that, well, you have to prove that we didn't cheat.
Right.
Well, let us look at the ballots. Well, no. You just got to prove it otherwise. We're not going to let you see the ballots that are counted.
And that's what we're doing. I mean, we're looking from a black box of anomaly and saying, look, this can't make sense. And I want you to get into your exit poll stuff as well. But let's be clear. I mean, and you and I agree here. We would be the first people transitioning to say, okay, what is life going to be like in a Biden presidency?
Right.
We wouldn't be having these arguments and conversations. We're not sitting here contesting the election on the basis of, this is not driven out of the same pain that Democrats felt in 2016. This is driven out of the fact that there are clear outliers here, and there are clear things that show that this election was not on the up and up. Should we get to a place where we can't, that case can't be made, we'll transition to talking about, okay, well, how does a conservative maintain their freedom of speech, their Second Amendment rights under a Biden administration? And we'll get talking about that if that's what it is. But for right now, before December 14th, when those votes are certified and we end up back, looking at the electors coming in and making their case for which the electoral college votes go from each state, we'll be all about it. I mean, but between now and December 14th, by golly, I mean, what are we going to do? We got to fight for this nation. This is the most important thing.
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to, the vote counts and all this other stuff in Pennsylvania, where, he had to win. So I've got the screen share, right, that Biden had to win 79% of the final 900,000 votes in other words, to overcome his lead. Now, what Barris was doing on the pundit was saying that based on the information that he had, and that's what ended up being the fraud, right, is that Pennsylvania just kept finding ballots, that even in a mail-in excuse state, you have to, how many ballots are outstanding. And he said on Friday morning last week, when he was on Bannon's show, and Bannon said, all right, so how's Pennsylvania looking? He said, well, yesterday at the close of day, they told all of us that do this as a living that there were 450,000 roughly ballots outstanding to count, which made it impossible. I mean, he almost had to sweep those like 95% to win. But he said, but when you know it, this morning we come in and they said, voila, we found there's 750,000 ballots left to count. So they just were finding votes to put this stuff in. Now, what Steve Deace was saying, he said, I've got a very close friend of mine who I would trust with my life, who's in Pennsylvania right now, helping the Trump campaign on this recount. And he said the stuff that they were seeing, they were being locked still, even though they were supposedly told they could be in the room, they were being locked out, and that city managers were walking by them and taunting them, showing them a city badge, saying, don't you wish you had one of these? Meaning they can go anywhere, but these guys who are there by law aren't being allowed in the room. He said that he saw U.S. Postal Service trucks pull up during the afternoon in the loading dock area, and boxes were being unloaded off of the USPS trucks in.
Right.
They're not driving. It's not Uber. Right. It's not Uber Eats. They're not dropping off food for everybody to eat.
Right.
So,
And
So
we should point out that Richard Barris, the guy who just made that statement, he was kicked off of
Twitter last night.
Not yet. It was not yesterday. It was the day before, for the middle of the day.
Oh yeah.
And he was on Tucker last night as well. So I mean, and this is a guy who's a nonpartisan guy, just trying to uncover the truth for people.
Right.
So what about your exit poll? I mean, we think the exit polls were completely flawed, but they also tell some stories that the mainstream media is not telling.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because you've got, well, that's my here. I can show this though anyway. So this breakdown here, let me leave that up. I'll do this real quick. So let me see if I can blow this up or not. This is when I go through the Edison software that was that leak from the New York Times. Somebody pulled the source. This is the data thing that everybody is going through right now. That Cultural Husbandry is the one who posted it.
Yeah, it's a CSV file anybody can download.
Yeah, anybody can download this. There's 2 files on a tiny URL. You have to find the right one. But this is what you pull. There's what 8,200 cells of data. Just from my data mining, it shows that there's a switched votes of 2,581,557.68. So
Trump retweeted this, right?
Yeah, he retweeted it. So
when it was 2.7 million or whatever.
Yeah, 2 points. And I've seen some people that have come up with 3.8 million, 3.2 million. So again, I'm not a data scientist. I just go through and do rudimentary Excel spreadsheets, given an investment banking background that I have, to show all the vote tabulations. Now, if this 2,500,000, and you'll see in some of these, and where it's interesting is they don't make any sense. I don't know if will be able to show it or not. But you get to like here,
the Benford's law, the leading digit indicator.
Yeah, the leading digit indicator. I'm still going through that on this analysis to show, but the first, if I just randomly pick 20 entries and put them in, they don't add up, right? It defies Benford's law. But here you're seeing an 859% difference in a vote count, right? And this is where the optical illusion happened, because what they're doing during the reporting is they're dropping these in. So you'll see here, these will be 51-47 for one party or the other. But then when you come over here and actually look at what the actual math ended up being, some of these were 67-51, 51-18, right? The numbers don't add up because they're not showing you that each
the drops. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not showing you that each drop was, 8,000 ballots on this one, 4,000 ballots here. They're just doing the total. So it's totally tabulating. So then you have to break down what was, cell 1 or cell 2 less cell 1, and what is that difference? And then you break it out. So that's what I went and did. But I mean, you get to Virginia and Pennsylvania, and it's a cluster, man. I mean, none of these numbers make any sense whatsoever. Here you see all my red. I mean, that's where there's irregularities out the wazoo that just don't make any sense. These numbers are just popping around. So you go through, there's so much of that. And so anyway.
Tell us about more of the exit poll stuff, because the exit poll stuff, I think, obviously we've disputed some of the claims, but I think we should point people to some of the demographic data that shows, what happened with white men. And I mean, when you add it up, you sort of say, well, if there was this kind of attrition,
right?
Well, where did these extra 10 million votes come from?
Right. And that's where, going back to our show we did the other day, that the exit polls don't make any sense. And so either the exit polls don't make any sense whatsoever because so many people mail-in voted, but you still had millions of people that went out and voted in person.
Right.
So you would think you would still get the same thing, especially you would think that the exit polls then, since the claim was made that most Democrats mailed in their ballots this year.
Right.
So most Republicans are going to the polls. Well, if that was the case, then the exit polls would be skewed heavily in Trump's favor, right? For all the breaking for GOP, breaking for men, whatever, and they don't show that. So just in Georgia, for example, you had in the race weight side of it. So supposedly the white vote on the race breakdown, and the percentage of white people in Georgia increased from a 75% of white to 80% from 2016. Supposedly he lost whites by 14 points, and Biden gained 19 points from 2000. And I was using CNN. I tried to keep it constant and use CNN exit polls from 16 and this year. So if he lost, that's 14 and 19. That's a 33-point swing, right? But we're nail biting for Georgia. right? It's down to what, 10,000 votes?
Right.
Just in that race alone, if they make up 80% of the populace, and he lost 14 points to being 43% in the exit polls, and Biden got 55%, so he's plus 12. Again, he should have won by a million
a lot
votes.
of black people that voted for Trump.
Well,
that dispelled the other myth of the fact that the black voter repudiated Trump's obvious racism.
Right, but that's again, and they show the non-white vote went from 32% for Trump in 2016 down to 18 points. But then if you go through and look at sex by race, those numbers, none of those numbers make any sense whatsoever, because you had him, he only lost 4 points amongst white men, and he actually only lost 1 point to women. So how do you lose by sex by 3 points, but you lost by 9 or 12 points in the overall race? And then amongst blacks, if he lost that much or whatever, how did he gain 3 points amongst black men and 4 points among black women? And that can be extrapolated out. You go to Michigan, same thing. All of these don't make any sense. They're showing that how is he losing whites, but then either gaining in white women or maybe losing white men? And if white men broke, so I think the average was supposedly he lost 7 points amongst white men in the national exit poll.
And this exit poll from CNN is about a 16,000 size sample set, right?
And some of them were like 3,900 sample set from 2016 or whatever. Yeah. So
it's still statistically significant. That can't put a poll out without it.
Right. But
I don't know what does it take to put out a poll?
Exactly. It doesn't seem like it takes much these days to put these polls out. He's not losing these on these exit polls. When you actually get into the granular data, he's not losing these at a point where it's a neck and neck race. So,
how many people in this nation voted twice, man? There's just no way with these numbers. This flood of numbers.
Well, you're seeing
nobody feel like they were going to get a felony if they went in and they mailed in their ballot. And then when the Democrats said on the day of election, get out to the polls. I know we told you it's COVID, but get out there and vote. A lot of people just say, you know what, I'm going to risk a potential felony and I'm just going to go ahead and vote again.
Right. Yeah. If you think about what happened during the race riots, right? All the racial injustice this past summer, the DAs weren't charging anybody with these federal crimes, right? Whether they were, attacking federal property, attacking federal statues, attacking police officers. DAs were like, we'll let you out of jail. Well, guess who came through and paid the bill, right? Kamala Harris, right? She tweeted out, hey, donate to this fund. Yeah,
Minnesota Freedom Fund.
So now you have.
I have a lot of friends that voted, contributed to that, and I think that's totally un-American.
And so now you have an embedded roster of who you can get to do your will, right? You know the people that were causing all the strife. You know the people that got out of jail, and then you bailed them out most likely. So now those people are going to come work for you. Yeah. Now you turn to that AFL-CIO document, right, where they're saying, hey, here's the process, here's how it's going to go. Yeah. And so now you have them, the unions taking over. We know unions don't play patty cake, right? They play rough when they get into something. Right. So they actually go through and talk about their strategy. And their strategy was that Trump will never be leading in the vote again after 10:59 p.m. Eastern time. So that's when the West Coast polls close. And it told their people to say this, I'm paraphrasing, basically relax. When the mail-in and the absentee ballots begin to be counted, Biden's going to take the lead. So Trump may be up at 10:59, but he's not going to win. Well, how do you know all this? Like, how do you actually put out a document to recruit the poll workers that's part of your strategic considerations that was to take place? Yeah. So again, if you start looking at these exit polls, you look at the polls going in, you look at who was working the polls, who was not allowed to work the polls, right, being the Republican side, and you take into account all of the shenanigans that went on with people saying that they saw people pushing ballots through 3 or 4 times. Yeah, or 50 times. Or 50 times, right? And again, none of it makes any sense. So where would it be fair, right? And again, let's assume the race ends up being exactly how it came out, right? Let's say Biden won Michigan, and he won Wisconsin, and he won Arizona, and about all these battleground states. Then what is saying, why don't we just go do a revote in just those states, right? Floridians don't have to come out and revote again, right? Anything that was done that another party won by 3 points or more to whatever, you don't have to go revote. But all the contentious battles and legal battles are going on in these 6 or 7 states. Right. Why don't we just say, look, we've got a month before the Congress gets set, right? January 6th. Why don't we just do a revote? All the systems are there. You have all the same data, right? Let's just reprint the ballots, have people come out. I mean, that seems fair. I don't see why you'd have a problem with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly capitulating on Arizona and doing only a spot check audit in Arizona is not going to be a pathway. I mean, those are tiny little kicking of the tires, black box. So the only other way about this would be to say, how about the only other aspect of this thing that's going on is some of the stuff that Code Monkey Z is pointing out is if we look at the systemic problem with Dominion voting. I mean, I don't know who believes there ought to be a weighted feature. The fact that that's even a feature built in, that it's, who cares about looking at the source code of these, Dominion software systems if they actually have a feature that lets one of 3 administrators in the county come in and say, okay, we're gonna have this we're gonna have a 3% peel off of the vote for Biden. That's unconscionable. And if there's a real legal challenge there, then I think any state that software was used in, and Texas doesn't use that software. If any of the states that use that software, their election ought to be invalid. I think I think this is just too important of a decision for the American people that we're not going to be able to move forward united if this is the case, that we let this kind of stuff stand. So so Friday the 13th, it's getting scary. It's a pretty grim outlook, right? For actually, ironically, now like Pennsylvania looks more hopeful from a Supreme Court possibility. And Arizona and Georgia are not looking so good right now.
Not with the way they're doing the recounts, and then with them pulling their court case or their filing in Arizona. Now, what Molly McCann did say, Molly McCann works with Sidney Powell at her law firm. What she did say was that they found so much irregularities in the Dominion software that if they decide to file a lawsuit against Dominion and the voting systems, then that pulls in. I've got where's my map here? I have a map of the. Let's see if I got it. It's not it.
So that pulls in what? That's gonna let the election get challenged in a different way.
Yeah, it'll show it shows all of the states in which Dominion has. Trying to find it here. This is the breakdown of that poll that night, or where we left off the night of. And let's see, I don't know where I put that, but I have a map of all the states that Dominion software is in. Here it is, right here.
Okay.
And so let me enlarge that. So Dominion is all the orange. So Dominion is
Arizona, Nevada, or
Nevada. It's Maricopa, and I think that's not Yuma. I forget which one that is, but so you got Nevada, of course, California almost entirely, right? But then you come up with the entire state of Georgia's Dominion.
Georgia. And
what's interesting about Georgia is a lawsuit was filed by an election integrity group in September of this year, saying, dude, this software is terrible. I mean, it can easily be manipulated. Then you see it's done in New York and a lot in Michigan, and then Wisconsin as well. Milwaukee County isn't one of them, but I think Racine County is one. And so you saw some of the irregularities out here in Dane, stuff like that. But so if what they're looking then to do is say, okay, we're going to file potentially against Dominion, and if they file against Dominion, then obviously Georgia gets looped in. Michigan, they'll do recounts probably, or they'll be able to go through and comb the software for California and Colorado as well.
Right.
So, I mean, there could be a big hit to those guys. But here, what I was showing here, and this is interesting for the night of, when we went to sleep that night, Michigan was a 8-point lead for Trump. Wisconsin was a 4-point lead, but there was only 92% of the precincts left. And with the remaining precincts
were counted, right?
92% of the precincts were in. Yeah. So, so this over here on the right is how many precincts had reported that night. And this is where Barros was saying, look, based on what we know and looking at the percentages of the county breakdown, it's impossible for him to win Wisconsin. He said the same with Pennsylvania even. He said, look, even though there's 56% in, from what we know of what the total
ratio of where it's going.
Yeah, and he was up by 12 points, right? So Georgia, it was a little, I mean, he said, look, still based on what we know, it's going to be tough for him to win, but Georgia could be a true toss-up. Nevada.
Sure. I mean, when's the last time Georgia went blue?
Yeah, since 92 and Clinton. But Nevada is interesting because, again, going back to the exit polls and what we know from that was that 41% of he won Latinos at 41% in Nevada.
That's in Georgia.
Yeah, and he only and I looked yesterday. He only lost white men in Nevada, I think, by 4 points or something like that. So
this racist president is losing white votes and gaining, across all different minority and intersectionalities.
Yeah, and people of color, right?
Go figure.
So, but then here, what I think is interesting for people to understand is there's what's called Benford's Law. Now, Benford's Law is it's considered mathematical DNA. So this law is used in courts when they're trying to prove fraud, Enron, that type of thing, right? They go through and they can show Benford's Law. If it doesn't adhere to Benford's Law, it doesn't mean it's not fraud, or doesn't mean it's fraud, but it begins to poke the questions of saying, hey, we need to look into this. So this is what Benford's Law is supposed to look like. So the first digit's a leading digit frequency law. In any math, in just random throwing numbers in or whatever that are actually statistical, this is the way the curve should look.
Right.
You look here at, and it's going to be hard to read, so I'll read them out for you. But the upper here is Trump votes. This is Philadelphia precincts. So the blue is Trump's votes, and what Benford's Law is in the orange. So pretty much sticks to it there, right? Milwaukee, he actually underperformed, which is telling you that something's wrong, right? It's way underperforming on the 2, 3, and 4 digit. Now, 60% of all of your numbers in a leading digit Benford's Law is going to be 1, 2, or 3. So, and you can pick anything. You can take the weight of Saturn times the miles from Jacksonville, Florida to Tallahassee. It most likely is going to come 60% of the time. That number is going to start with a 1, 2, or 3. So this is how they figure out fraud. So you look at that. You look at Detroit precincts. He underperformed in the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 category, overperformed in the 2 and 3, and was right on top of 1. The bottom here is Biden's. So can you scroll up thing? So here you look, he underperformed in the 1 category, but way overperformed in the 2s, way overperformed in the 3s. Then it levels out. Well, the reason why this leveled out is because they loaded up so many here and here that they didn't have the bite-sized numbers they needed anymore, right? Because they were loading them all up in these. You look at, and then this was the same thing. This was Philadelphia right here. This is Milwaukee. So again, on Milwaukee, then you see what happened there. You see, look at that. I mean, his 1 was just off the charts. I mean, and then you go down here and he underperformed down here because they just stacked so much here on the ones. They needed 10,000, throw in 10,000. They need 100,000, throw in 100,000. And then you go here on the other side to Detroit.
These are on the Delta dumps. This is not like the number. This is not the leading digit of the total number of votes in that county through the night and as it gets
as they were dumped.
As they are dumped. So you have a new tranche of 1,150 votes. Right. That's going with a number of 1. And correct. And not every system follows Benford's Law, but this is a 1938 mathematician, and this is what has been used to identify election fraud in the past.
Correct.
Benford's Law follows for election deltas.
Correct. And so then here, this is Milwaukee. So this is Biden here. The first chart, and then the middle chart is Trump, and the third is Jorgensen. I mean, if you look, all right, he was way far off on the leading digit here, right, on a frequency of 80%.
Right.
Then all of a sudden it just spikes and elevates, goes through, stays above. And this is where the irregularity truly shows, is in these numbers here. Because these are supposed to be, if you go back to Wade Law, it's supposed to be 9.7%, 7.9%, 6.7, and 5.8. Yet he is up at, 80, or not 80%, but he's showing on the frequency, he's up at probably 20% right here, because this is 30. This is where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So, he's just way overperforming here because they're just now saying, shit, we need 40,000 votes. Throw in a 40,000 number, right?
Yeah.
This was just where the system was doctored. If you look at Jurgensen, I'm sorry, I messed up. This was Blankenship over here. Look at Jurgensen's. Almost perfect.
Right.
Right?
Nobody was messing with poor Joe's votes.
Well, what they showed as well in one of the data dumps that you saw in one of those Truman Black on Twitter, data science, he went through and looked at all this stuff as well. What he showed was that votes were being taken away from Trump and sent to Jurgensen also. So he was having votes skimmed off of his vote count and sent to Biden and to Jurgensen. Now there definitely are occasions where Trump got votes that went from Biden to him, but not in any way the scale that went the opposite.
Why would that happen? Why would they be doing that if they were fudging with it?
Why would they?
They wanted to do a weighting in a lighter district.
But they couldn't. If you then go back to what Shabby and his guys were showing, right, they were going into heavily Republican precincts and shaving it off there. So they could use.
Right. You talked about that with scorecard, right? Scorecard. You definitely do not want to bastardize your own candidate's votes when you're playing with scorecard. You want to make sure it's a right-leaning county so that when you flip those columns, which does follow Benford's law, by the way.
Right.
So there's two things. There's mail-in ballot dumps, and that's what's violating Benford's law.
Right.
The other thing is the flip of the software. When you flip with the scorecard thing that flips the columns, plausible deniability,
right.
that doesn't trick Benford's law because the number is still the same. It's false.
Correct. I mean, again, if you've got a county of 100,000 people and you start presenting, or at 8 o'clock, you can start pushing data in. And if it's all shuffled, right, you're going to go put in, all right, here's 100 and something votes, here's 1,000 votes, here's 2,000 votes. But as those votes get in and get shuffled in normally, it's going to follow Benford's law to the most part. I mean, again, you may have a higher propensity of ones or a higher propensity of threes, but generally you're not going to have a higher propensities of the 4, 5, 6, and 7s. Because again, 60% of all numbers, the leading digits 1, 2, or 3.
Right.
So what they did as you see in Milwaukee, or what was the one that I showed here, where it was off the charts here in Milwaukee, right? The first leading digit was way up here when it's all said, for the all said and done in the city level. So this was to show the city precincts, right? Way off the chart. What they tried to make up for it here in Milwaukee County was to say, all right, well now, right, we got to put these with the real numbers that were coming in were down here. But then in Milwaukee City, it spiked because they know they could use the racial tension and the black vote and the minority vote just went away from Donald Trump and went heavily to Biden. So they could show that scale. But again, if you look at the exit polls, that doesn't make any sense. So A plus B, generally, right, in science in math is always going to equal C. Right. So you can't have all of these three things be true, but all three of them can be false. Or I'm sorry, not all three can't be false, but they can't be true, right? So you can have exit poll data that was wrong. You can have Benford's law data that was manipulated, and you can have the scorecard system that tricked off the votes, is what we see in the Edison software.
No wonder they just left this guy in his basement all year.
Right.
So where do we go from here? I mean, how do we show hope? Because this is looking pretty grim, right?
Well, I think
the only good thing about it is all these citizen programmers like us are getting out there and going, this doesn't make sense. If enough people say this doesn't make sense, maybe they'll stop slapping that stupid disclaimer on everything everybody says.
Right.
Okay, this is worth looking into. But they want to move on. These guys want to be to January 20th already, and it's unconscionable.
Right. Well, the censorship of all of us, right, and what's happening with Barris and everybody. I'm surprised that Code Monkey Z hasn't been shut down yet. I mean, he's the one that he went through the Dominion software manual, and he's not coming at this going, oh my God, this election was stolen. This is so wrought with fraud. He's just saying, look how it's easy to manipulate this. It's easy to do this. Like, if you look at this, I can write code, or someone could write code. And he said in his tweet this morning that essentially an IT specialist sitting in that room could be the one who makes the entire election. Yeah. So
it's not like, it doesn't take a crazy hacker to do this stuff. It's a matter of setting a parameter.
Correct.
That's really accessible to anybody who has access to this part of the software.
But what programmers have pointed out, though, is that this system was set up to the internet, and it's not supposed to be. Right? To maintain integrity of the election, it's not supposed to be wired in, and it was wired in. And so that's what they're saying too. You can see all these pings that happen where people are going into the system and hacking it, and so they can manipulate it. So I mean, again, he's not coming at it. This Code Monkey Z is not coming at this saying, "I'm a Trump guy and I'm going to show you what all is wrong."
Right?
He's just he's a programmer, and he's gone through the manual and basically in 8 hours read through their manual and has poked holes in it left and right. I mean, you can go through. He's got threads, 15 threads long of all the inaccuracies and things that you can do in that software.
Yeah.
And in 2006, what was interesting is I watched a video yesterday. Fox News had a guy on who was a Princeton or Columbia or Princeton computer science guy. And back in 2006, he showed with a microchip that costs $4, he can go through, if you give me access to the data room, and in 7 minutes, I can change the election. And so when you hear people say, well, oh, the election rooms, they're secure, there's cameras everywhere, whatever. Okay, you have a federal maximum security prison, and Epstein supposedly killed himself and the cameras went out, right? So if there's cameras that are in these rooms, then show us all the camera work. Don't that there be any delays. Yeah. But if I get access to that room and he shows, you go through, you unscrew the back of the thing, you pop a chip out, you put another chip in, the program starts to spit it out and changes the votes.
Yeah.
So he said it can be done. A guy in Ohio went in front of, I think it was either the state Supreme Court or a district court or whatever in Ohio. This was after the 2012 election. And he showed I could have made the change in these on the programming and changed the election if I wanted to as well. So programmers have been able to show this, but yes, like you said to start off the show, when CISA comes out and says, oh, there's no indication of any fraud, New York Times, full page banner ad yesterday, right on the
it's
page.
And it's certitude and it's certainty.
Right. Because what
like that. I mean, I've shared this before. I wrote the script for KMBC with the precinct collection across the nation in 2000, the Hanging Chad. I'm telling you, I couldn't believe how brittle the system was. Now, ostensibly, over time, it has changed and gotten more secure. But even 20 years ago, their willingness to allow that kind of openness, throwing FTP servers full of data here and there. And I mean, the fact that, if you can't fix an election if you fix the election system.
Right. Fair. Yeah. And so I think the hope goes that, Sidney Powell did tweet out yesterday or the day before that from what she's seen, and she's indicating the Dominion software data, that it's mathematically impossible for Biden to have won. Now, it's up to her to prove that, right? But again, just from the limited data that we've got in this one source data from the New York Times, and again, you can go on and find it if you search for husbandry and Code Monkey Z. Actually, it wasn't Code Monkey Z, it was Cultural Husbandry. You can find this data yourself and pull the Excel sheet down. If they're going to go that route and say, look, I can already show just me, I've shown almost 2.6 million votes were swapped and moved over in some way, shape, either lost because they do what's called fractional. GEMS does a fractional voting. So that's where I think the hand counts are crucial. If you actually allow the hand counts to go, not like Georgia, but where you actually let the hand counts go by, I've got to prove A, B, C, and D per law to show that this vote counted, because one ballot equals one vote. What this software does is it makes that one vote be 1.6 for one candidate and 0.4 for another, right? I mean, I think it was in Shiva's thing, he talked about that in Michigan, it shows that Biden received a 1.7 to 1 vote after 4 a.m. In Wisconsin, it was 2.65 to 1. In Pennsylvania, it was 3.05 to 1. And in Georgia, 2.5 to 1. It's impossible for that to happen.
They're waiting.
So, but the way they do this fractional stuff is to show, and that's what I showed when I was going through my data, because the numbers weren't adding up. I'm like, wait a minute. If the split of that 500 vote was supposed to be 51-49, because that's what it shows on their thing. Here's the split. It'll show vote percentage Dem, vote percentage Republican. It was 51-49. That tells you that 100 votes is going to be 51 votes for the one, 49 to the other. It wasn't coming out that way. It was coming out 52.6 for one and 48.4 for the other. 47.4. So it was waiting. So if you go through and break out those fractionals and say, all right, well, who do those really go to then you have a straight line vote. If it's truly going to be broken out 51-49, not 50. And I was finding in some of these, when optically it comes across the screen and says 51-49, if you go through and actually break down the actual vote difference and then how it was truly allocated based on then the next total vote for Dem and Republican, some of these were like 72-26. It was just like, wait, how does 51-49 go to 72-26 when you actually look at the math? So, well, it's how they fractionalize it, right? And then augment that in their sourcing.
Right.
So I think that if they're gonna go after Dominion and these data systems and show the fraud, and especially if they can show that Dominion did the same thing in all these other color revolutions, for example.
Right.
Here, let me move this over for you. the voting irregularities here. But if you look at, and they can show in Poland or in Ukraine or in whatever, that this system was used, and it's used around the world. I think it's owned. It's a Chinese-owned voting machine company that was providing all the voting machines that Dominion uses. Then you got to start saying, all right, if it happened in other countries, then and we're showing it to happen here, then this system is just faulty, and it's faulty everywhere. It's not just the United States. It wasn't just Michigan, or it wasn't just Wayne County.
Yeah,
it was everywhere. So
well, I mean, a lot of people are censoring, not just censoring, but censuring conservatives for fueling these conspiracies that are adding to the distrust of our election integrity. And I would argue, for the same reason, precisely the reverse. Questioning the integrity of an election is far, is not nearly as bad as actually cheating an election, right? I mean, we have to have confidence in our election, and there's no way, you're already pushing us to come together with unity. I'm sorry, the outliers are just. Something is rotten in Denmark, folks.
Right. Well, you see what they're doing, right? I mean, yeah, unity. You just unify. Biden won. You guys are crazy. Whatever. The other side, they're still fighting the 2016 election. Hell, Stacey Abrams here in Atlanta thinks she's still the governor of Georgia.
She still hasn't seated.
Right. And so, did we unify in 2016? No. What happened in 2016? The liberals and the left came after everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And they tried to nail anybody and destroy anybody who didn't think like them. And now you're seeing BLM saying, "Hey, Joe Biden, we want something for our vote." Right. We're coming after you already.
That's right.
They attacked the Democrat headquarters in Portland. They attacked and spray painted and vandalized. This isn't going to let up. I mean, if a Democrat walked into the poll saying, "Look, I'm really not for this, but I want the violence to stop, and I think that getting Trump out will do that," well, I could have told you were going to be wrong, because Bolsheviks, they use the people that they need to get them into power, then they wreck those people. So Bolsheviks and Mensheviks, anybody can look it up and see how that went down in Russia. Useful idiots. And so all these professors and all these cultural Marxists that have been used in the institutions, and I forget who it was that said, control the institutions. And once we control the institutions, we'll control society. And that's what we're seeing now, because we're all being destroyed.
Academia, healthcare, everything. Right.
And you're seeing the, like you said, I mean, even People's Pundit, right? He's a middle of the road guy. He's not favoring one side or the other, but he sees fraud when he sees it and he points it out. He gets banned. So, everybody's jumping to Parler now, and now everybody's saying they're going to go over to MeWe or WeMe, whatever it is, get away from Facebook. And you're seeing people on Twitter as the conservatives are leaving, you're seeing the liberals say, "Thank God, now we have our platform where we can just talk amongst ourselves." Well, dude, that's groupthink, right? That's confirmation bias. You're never going to see an opposing opinion.
Dominated us anyway on that.
Yeah, and I know you were debating on your social media page with one of your friends. A friend of mine got into it with me yesterday with all the gotcha questions. Do you believe this? Do you believe that? And I'm like, dude, answer my question first. Is math science? Yeah. And because he's a huge climate change guy, right? Huge, abortion and all. So I'm like, if embryos aren't science, right? It's just your biology is what it is. You can be made to be whatever you want. And science, the baby isn't born until it's actually born. It's not a life until it's born. Then is math science? Math is actually the most provable science we have, right? For generations, 1 + 1 is always equal 2. If you're not going to address that math is science, then we can't have a conversation, because you're going to move the goalpost the whole time. So you've got to have a place to start from. And that's what I think people and all of our viewers that are watching probably say the same thing. Whenever they get in a discussion with a Democrat or a liberal progressive, they move goalposts all the time, right? And they hit you with attacks. They put you on defense, right? It's the Alinsky tactic. They got to keep you on defense. Oh, I'm not a racist. I'm not a sexist. It's like, dude, can we have a civil discourse, right? Let's have a meeting of the minds. Whenever I'm debating a liberal progressive, I always say there's got to be rules here. The rules are, you can't debate from fact or from emotion and feelings, right? You got to use facts. You start with your premise, I will address it, and then I come at you with my premise. You address it. That's how we go back and forth. And then two, you can't start labeling me every name in the book, because you get angry, because then you're debating from fact or from feelings and emotions. And three, you can't storm off, right? One of those three things happens every time. Every time. because they can't debate.
But the season of debate is not right now. We all make our case for what should be the policies and what should happen. And we agree that there's a process by which if which one side has won over the hearts and minds of the American public, that should be reflected in the vote.
Right.
Always agreed that the election integrity, and whether you agree with the Electoral College or not, that is how we do it. And we rely on this final system to be the arbiter of truth in terms of how
checks and balance.
Yeah, how we ended up landing in terms of our, okay, I think I'm going to vote for Trump this year. No, I think I'm going to give Biden a chance. If we can't trust the final decision point of the system, then we're screwed, guys. Then we're screwed, and we're going to be marching through a long, dark winter that's much longer than the winter.
Well, and you're going to have just California and New York and Chicago dictate who's going to lead the country.
Yeah.
Because if you go to popular vote, then, I mean, like Dace was pointing out this morning, who's going to win 80 million votes as a Republican? You don't have the votes. I mean, the entire state of Texas, you have to get every single Republican to the poll in Texas. You have to get every single Republican to the poll in Florida. Like you literally have to do 100% turnout, because Democrats are going to pack the polls in California where they have all the population, California, New York, Chicago, Massachusetts, whatever. So you're never going to win again. So if you go to a popular vote, you what? You're muted.
No.
Oh, you were muted. You cut out. But yeah, you're never going to get 80 million votes as a Republican.
Yeah.
So I mean, electoral, and that's exactly what the framers were trying to avoid, right? Is that there's going to be a candidate, a side of a party that is never going to get power.
Well, that's okay. So that's the ultimate. I think the subtext of some of the Democrats not caring about this election result is, so long as they know that Biden, which is not, we can't prove that Biden fully won the popular vote, but they see if Biden is ahead in the popular vote, then it's a Machiavellian approach to end running around the Electoral College, right? Because ultimately they say, well, if he won the popular vote, then in reality, we got the ends that we were looking for. It was just through this means of corruption in each of these individual places. So they still feel like they have a mandate. They feel like having the popular vote gives them the mandate that the Electoral College wouldn't have given them. And I feel like that is some of the intellectual dishonesty that we're seeing from the left right now.
Yeah, because again, because the question then bodes, it's an easy question to answer if that premise is true. Why did the Republicans pick up what looks like 9 House seats now, and they're in the lead in 10 of the remaining 14?
Right.
Why did they pick up state house?
R stands for racist, and how come they did so well down ballot?
Right. I mean, again, I know we said it the other day. We picked up 57 House seats in New Hampshire alone, right? But we lost the state. But Biden won the state. Now, again, and in this election, another thing, I was talking to a gentleman yesterday who pointed out to me that, generally speaking, I think you and I were talking about this last weekend. Generally speaking, in an election, you have about 0.5 to maybe 1% of the total vote that doesn't vote for president, right? Only votes for president, doesn't vote for anybody else.
Right.
Supposedly in Pennsylvania, I think I saw it on Philadelphia Inquirer, one of the Philadelphia sources today, there was over 20% of the vote this time was just for president and not.
Because it takes time to fill in that bubble, man. You've done Scantron, somebody else Scantron.
But yeah, I think there's so many questions that people just need to ask. And again, like you and I have said, if the vote comes out that Biden won, and it's every legal vote that was counted, and it allows to go through the legal process, we will abide by it, right? Okay, let's move on then, right? The people's vote. But when you see so many irregularities to just simple questions, right? What if scenarios type of thing, and they don't play out. I mean, I always say, let's follow your theory to its logical conclusion, right? And once you start realizing that logical conclusion is going to disprove the theory, then you have to start from another basis, right? So if you're setting out to prove your theory and I'm walking you through it and it doesn't end up holding up, then you have to think of an alternative. And so that's why Mike and I, we keep saying, ask your own questions, right? I know don't let ideology blind you, right? And we've been guilty of it before as well. But if A plus B does not equal C, then just start asking the question. Now, you may prove your answer and it ends up being C, but you have to start asking the question going, look, this makes no sense. And if you look at these exit polls, if you look at, again, going back to the pre-election polls going in, if you look at the voting data, right, none of it makes any sense. So, I mean, again, Biden either won by 15 million votes, if you're to believe the exit polls, but here we are neck and neck in 7 states.
Right.
Again, it just A plus B does not equal C. So just start asking the questions of what happened. And then when you see so many people coming out and signing sworn affidavits, now you will hear on the left side will say, well, this prove, show us the evidence, show us the evidence. That's what court of law is for, right? If I'm a poker player, I don't show my hands as soon as they're handed to me, right? Where my evidence is how am I betting, right? Am I matching, right? Am I doubling down or whatever? Then when I'm asked to show my cards, I present my case.
Right.
And that's what the Trump campaign is doing now, is they're in the gathering evidence phase.
Let's hope they have the firepower to do it.
Yeah.
I hope everybody has a great Million MAGA March this weekend.
Right.
We'll be watching. Excited to see all those trucks and vehicles cruising cross country to join them in DC. We'll be there in spirit. Everybody, let's hope this Friday the 13th turns around. And everybody, please share our stuff.
Yeah, thanks for the comments as well.
Like what are saying. Thanks for the shares. Thanks for all the good feedback. And
yeah.
Anything else, please follow these other folks that we're looking at. I mean, we are not anonymous sources here. We are looking. Right. We are ingesting the data just like you. So
yeah, and if any of our followers have anybody that they follow that they want to suggest, hit us up on our Facebook page or wherever and let us know, because we're happy to. And we look at both sides. We try to find, those people, we try to stick to people who are in the middle of the road, so that we know that we're not getting a biased source like a People's Pundit or whatever. But yeah, let us know. And I want to thank everybody. My Hammer and Scorecard, we're over 20,000 views on that video. So for everyone that's watched it and shared it, thank you very much for that as well. So we want to grow and we want to bring you good content. So hopefully, again, keep sharing. And keep hitting us with information that you want to see us to investigate or questions that you have as well.
Awesome, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.